snowflakes drifted down in lazy spirals, melting as they touched the cracked cobblestones of Willow Street. Claire Bennett stood outside the dusty window of Second Chance's Thrift and Vintage, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee and wondering if she could afford to walk inside. The truth was, she couldn't. Not really. Her tiny online shop barely paid for rent in her cramped apartment above the old bakery. In winter was always the slow season. But vintage finds were her lifeline, and something about the handwritten 50% off wedding gowns sign tugged at her. When she pushed open the door, the familiar scent of mothballs and lavender hit her. Racks of satin, lace, and tulle swayed in the draught. Mrs. Whitcomb, the owner, looked up from behind the counter. "You're late for the good stuff, Claire. The collectors were here at dawn." Claire smiled faintly. "Then maybe the best one's still waiting for me." She wandered past a row of dresses until her fingers brushed something soft, aged ivory silk, heavier than the others. She pulled it free and caught her breath. The gown was exquisite. Simple lines, but the beadwork along the bodice shimmered like frost under light. It didn't belong here, in a cramped thrift store. It looked cherished. "What's the story on this one?" Claire asked. Mrs. Whitcomb shrugged. "Estate donation. Came in with a few boxes of linens. No one claimed it." Claire checked the price tag and winced. Even half off, it was more than she should spend. But something in her chest whispered, "Don't leave it." She decided to trust the whisper. Back at her apartment, she hung the dress carefully on the back of her bedroom door, and as she ran her hand along the hem, her fingers snagged on something tucked into the lining. It was an envelope, yellowed, unsealed. Her name wasn't on it, but the delicate handwriting read, "To the man I love, if I can find the courage to give this to you." Her heart thudding, she slid the letter free. The first line made her sit down on the edge of the bed. "Daniel, if you are reading this, it means I've finally told you the truth about the day we met and why I've loved you from the first moment." Claire didn't know a Daniel, but by the second paragraph, she knew one thing for sure. This was not just a love letter. It was a confession, and whoever Daniel was, he'd never received it. She set the letter down, staring at the wedding dress like it might explain itself. Snow tapped at the window. Somewhere outside, a church bell chimed the hour. Claire whispered into the empty room, "What am I supposed to do with you?" Claire sat at her tiny desk, the letter laid out in front of her, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside it. She'd read it 3 times, each pass deepening her curiosity. The writer, no name, just a flowing feminine script, spoke of a love born in a moment of crisis, of a promise unspoken, and a truth she had feared to confess. The final lines were unfinished, as though interrupted. She tried searching Daniel and a few phrases from the letter online, but nothing came up. Too many Daniels in the world. It wasn't until she flipped the envelope over that she noticed a faint embossed seal, Whitmore Estate. She typed it into her search bar. One name dominated the results, Daniel Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Industries, a man whose face appeared on business magazines, charity galas, and finance columns. And one more thing caught her eye, a news article from 2 years ago. Whitmore family mourns sudden death of beloved wife and mother, Lillian. Claire stared at the wedding dress hanging in her room. Could it be hers? She thought about calling the estate, but what would she say? "Hi, I bought a wedding dress at a thrift store and found an unsent love letter from your late wife." Instead, she slipped the letter back into the envelope, placed it carefully in her desk drawer, and whispered a prayer. "Lord, if I meant to return this, show me how." A week later, Mrs. Whitcomb waved her over as Claire passed the thrift store. "Claire, you do charity events sometimes, right?" Claire nodded. She occasionally donated vintage dresses for auctions. Mrs. Whitcomb held out a crisp cream envelope.
One of the local women's shelters got a last-minute invite to the Whitmore Foundation's Winter Gala. They asked if I knew anyone who could help with auction displays. I thought of you." Claire froze. Whitmore. 2 nights later, she stood in the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel, arranging gowns on mannequins for the silent auction. Crystal chandeliers glowed above, and a string quartet played near the stage. She was adjusting the hem of a dress when she felt a presence behind her. "Beautiful work," a deep voice said. She turned, and there he was, Daniel Whitmore himself, tall, impeccably dressed, with eyes that looked like they had seen too much grief and not enough joy. For a moment, Claire forgot how to speak. Then she managed, "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. I'm just helping the shelter tonight." Something unreadable passed over his face. "It's a cause close to my heart. My wife used to volunteer there." Claire's breath caught. She had no idea yet that in her desk drawer lay the last words Lillian Whitmore had never said to him. Daniel returned twice that night to check on the auction table, though Claire suspected it wasn't just the dresses he came to see. During the final hour, a sudden rush of guests surrounded her display. In the crowd, Claire caught a sight of a small boy, maybe 7 years old, standing slightly apart, holding a toy car. Before she could say hello, a woman swept by and whispered, "That's Ethan Whitmore. He hasn't spoken much since his mother died." Claire's heart squeezed. She knew silence like that, the kind born not of shyness, but of deep loss. Later, when she was packing up, Daniel appeared again. "You handled the crowd well." He glanced toward his son. "Ethan liked the red dress." Claire smiled softly. "Then I'll find him another one to see." Daniel hesitated, then said, "You have a calm about you. Not many people do. If you're ever free, perhaps you could visit the estate. Ethan could use more people like that." Claire agreed before she could second-guess herself.
2 days later, Claire drove up the winding road to Whitmore Estate. The mansion rose like something out of a storybook, surrounded by winter gardens dusted with frost. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching on polished wood and family portraits. Ethan met her at the door, clutching a small notebook. He didn't speak, but he smiled faintly and led her to the conservatory. And there, hanging in a beam of sunlight, was a dress. Not the one she'd bought, but startlingly similar. Claire's pulse quickened. Daniel entered, explaining, "That was my wife's reception dress. She had a different one for the ceremony, but I haven't seen it since before she passed." Claire swallowed hard. The dress in her apartment wasn't just any vintage find, it was Lillian Whitmore's wedding gown, and the letter hidden inside it might be the key to something Daniel never knew. Claire hadn't expected the estate to feel so warm. Yes, it was vast, and the hallways echoed with quiet, but the conservatory was filled with green life, the air soft with the scent of jasmine. Ethan sat at the piano, tiny hands hesitating over the keys. A sheet of music lay open, simple notes, the kind children start with. He glanced up at her, waiting. "Do you want to play together?" Claire asked gently. He nodded. She slid onto the bench beside him and began to hum as her fingers found the melody. Slowly he followed along. His rhythm faltered, but his eyes brightened with each correct note. When the piece ended, Daniel stood in the doorway. "You play beautifully," he said. Claire smiled. "He's a quick learner." Daniel's gaze lingered on his son, then on her. "Ethan hasn't touched the piano since Lillian died. She used to play every morning." Claire's heart tightened. She had no idea that upstairs in her apartment, Lillian's unsent letter waited, and in it, a mention of this very piano. Over the next few weeks, Claire visited the estate twice a week. She brought cookies, vintage storybooks, and sometimes sheet music. Ethan warmed to her quickly, using his notebook to draw little pictures of the things they did together. One afternoon, while they were sketching, Daniel returned early from a business trip. Claire noticed his tie was loosened, his eyes tired. "Long day?" she asked. "Long month." The business never stops. And Ethan, well, he's my real job now. Claire studied him. Behind the billionaire image, there was just a man trying to hold his world together. Ethan drew a picture of the three of them, stick figures, smiling, holding hands. Daniel's eyes softened when he saw it. "He's telling me something," Claire said, even without words. Daniel met her gaze. "He's telling me he trusts you." She smiled, but her heart ached. She still hadn't told Daniel about the dress or the letter. It happened on a Thursday. Claire arrived to find Ethan waiting at the piano with a folded piece of paper. When she opened it, she found hand-drawn notes, a melody. She played it, and Daniel came in, freezing mid-step. That's a song Lillian was writing before she—" His voice broke off. Claire's fingers stilled on the keys. "How did you know it?" Ethan tapped his head, then pointed to an old music box on the shelf. Daniel wound it, and the same melody tinkled out. Claire felt a chill. Lillian had left pieces of herself everywhere, music, dresses, letters, and Claire had stumbled into them like stepping stones towards something bigger. Maybe God wasn't done writing this family's story. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She pulled the wedding dress from its garment bag, laying it across her bed. The silk gleamed in the lamplight. She took out the letter again. The words were tender, vulnerable, and the last lines mentioned Daniel's habit of loosening his tie after work, his love for Ethan's laugh, and a secret. "If you ever read this, Daniel, know that the day I married you was the day I found my home. Even if God calls me away too soon, I pray you find another reason to laugh again." Claire's breath caught. Lillian had given him permission to love again. But if she gave him the letter, would it open old wounds or heal them? The Whitmore estate hosted its annual winter fair that month, an event that Lillian had started, with games, music, and charity auctions. Claire volunteered at the cookie stall with Ethan. The boy even spoke, just one word, "cookie," but Daniel heard it and froze, eyes wide. Later, as snow began to fall, Daniel found Claire watching the lights. "You've brought life back into this place," he said quietly. Claire shook her head. "I think it was already here. It just needed a little music." He smiled, but there was a sadness behind it. "Sometimes I wonder if Lillian had a hand in this." Claire's pulse pounded. If only he knew. She looked at him then, the words burning in her chest. "I have something that belonged to her." But instead, she whispered, "Maybe she did." The first heavy snowstorm of the year swept across the hills, blanketing the Whitmore estate with white. Claire had planned to leave after her lesson with Ethan, but Daniel insisted she stay until the roads cleared. In the cozy glow of the library, the three of them played a board game. Ethan laughed, a soft, breathy sound, when Claire pretended to lose on purpose. Daniel's gaze lingered on her, warm and unreadable. When Ethan went to bed, Daniel poured 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "He doesn't laugh like that often," he said. Claire took a sip. "He's healing." Daniel studied her for a moment. "So am I." The quiet between them deepened. Claire's hand itched to reach for the letter in her bag, to just tell him everything, but she froze, afraid that the fragile trust between them might shatter. A few days later, Claire returned to find Ethan in the conservatory with a photo album. He pulled her down beside him and opened to a wedding picture. Daniel and Lillian beneath a canopy of flowers, both radiant. Claire swallowed hard. "Your mom was beautiful." Ethan nodded, then pointed to a faded Polaroid tucked in the back. It showed Lillian holding the same dress Claire had bought, smiling as if she carried a treasure. Daniel walked in and froze. "Where did you find that?" Ethan handed him the photo. Daniel's brow furrowed. "I thought this picture was lost." He looked at Claire. That was her first choice for the ceremony. But she changed her mind last minute.
Claire's heart pounded. She had the dress and the letter, and he didn't know. One crisp Saturday, Daniel asked Claire to join them for church service. "It's something Lillian and I used to do with Ethan," he explained. Inside the small chapel, sunlight poured through stained glass, casting colors on the pews. Ethan sat between them, humming softly during the hymns.
The pastor's message was about God's timing, how even in loss, he weaves redemption into our lives. Claire felt the words settle in her heart like a challenge. Was keeping the letter protecting Daniel or robbing him of something God wanted him to have? After service, they shared lunch at a small diner. Daniel's smile was easier, his shoulders less burdened. Today felt right, he said, and Claire wondered if right might one day mean them. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. Claire was teaching Ethan a simple lullaby. When he stopped, looked at her and said, clear as day, "Play it again." Claire's hands stilled. She turned to Daniel, who had just entered the room. His eyes went wide. "Ethan," Daniel's voice broke, You spoke." Ethan shrugged as if it were no big deal, but his father's hands shook as he hugged him. That night, Daniel thanked Claire in a voice thick with emotion. "You've done something I thought was impossible." She smiled, but inside guilt gnawed at her. She wasn't being fully honest with him. And now, it mattered even more. Christmas lights twinkled across the estate. Daniel invited Claire to the family Christmas Eve dinner, a small gathering with Ethan, Daniel's sister, and a few close friends. After dinner, Ethan brought Claire a small box. Inside was a delicate silver locket. "It was my mum's," Daniel explained. "Ethan wanted you to have it." Claire's throat tightened. "I can't." "Yes," Daniel said firmly. "You've given us so much. Let us give something back." She accepted, her fingers brushing his. For a heartbeat, the air between them changed, charged, warm. Then Daniel asked quietly, "Claire, before you came into our lives, where did you come from?" The question cut deeper than he knew, and Claire realized that to truly be part of this family, she would have to tell him about the wedding dress and the letter. Claire sat on her bed that night, the locket still in her hand. Beside it, the wedding dress lay folded in its bag. She traced the envelope inside, her fingers trembling. Every moment with Daniel and Ethan made her love them more, but the longer she kept the secret, the heavier it felt, like a wall between them she'd built herself. She prayed, quietly, "Lord, I want to do what is right, but if I tell him, will it hurt more than help?" The silence after her prayer was deafening. The next day, Daniel called unexpectedly. "Claire, we're having a small gathering tomorrow, some close friends. I'd like you to come." Her heart leapt and then sank. Being closer to him without telling the truth was both a gift and a burden. The estate glowed with golden light that evening. Laughter floated from the drawing room as guests mingled. Claire wore a simple navy dress, but Ethan's smile when he saw her made her feel like she belonged. Daniel introduced her warmly to his friends. "This is Claire, the woman who's been helping Ethan find his voice again." They asked her about music, about teaching, about life. She answered, smiling, but each question felt like it scraped against the truth she wasn't telling. At one point, she stepped into the hallway for air. That's when she saw it, a framed photograph of Lillian in her wedding gown. Her stomach dropped. It was the dress, the same one, now in her apartment, with a letter hidden inside. Later that night, when most guests had gone, Daniel found her on the terrace, looking out at the moonlit gardens. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said. "You made it better, for both of us." She turned to him, her heart pounding. "Daniel, there's something I need to tell you. It's about your—" "Daddy," Ethan's voice broke in. He came running, holding a blanket. "Will you tuck me in?" Daniel smiled apologetically. "Rain check?" Claire nodded, her chance slipping away like snow melting in the sun, but the weight in her chest grew heavier. 2 days later, a call jolted Claire from sleep. It was Daniel. His voice was strained. "Claire, Ethan fell at school. He's okay, but he's asking for you." She drove to the clinic in record time. Ethan sat on the bed, a bandage on his forehead, holding the small music notebook she'd given him. "Play?" he whispered. They found a quiet room with a piano, and she played his favorite lullaby. Daniel watched from the doorway, his eyes dark with something she couldn't read. Afterwards, as they walked to the car, he said quietly, "You're family to him now." Her throat tightened. Then it's time to tell him the truth. Claire returned to the estate the next day, the wedding dress folded carefully in her arms, the letter in its envelope resting on top. Daniel met her in the library, surprise flickering across his face. "Claire, what is this?" She took a deep breath. "Daniel, I found this dress in a thrift shop months ago. It had this letter hidden inside. I didn't know it was Lillian's until I saw the photos here." She handed him the envelope. His hands trembled as he opened it. As he read, his breath hitched. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. She wrote this before she died. I never saw it. I didn't know if giving it to you would hurt you," Claire whispered, "but I couldn't keep it any longer." He looked at her for a long moment and then turned away. "I need time." The door closed softly behind him, leaving Claire alone in the quiet, wondering if she'd just lost them both. The Whitmore estate felt colder without Daniel's welcome. Claire still came to teach Ethan, but Daniel avoided her, his polite greetings stripped of warmth. Ethan sensed it too. One afternoon, while drawing at the kitchen table, he slid her a picture, 3 stick figures holding hands with a big red heart. Claire smiled sadly. "It's beautiful, Ethan." He pointed to the largest figure, Daniel, and then mimed a broken heart. Her throat tightened. "I know, sweetheart. I'm trying."
That night, Claire prayed again. "Lord, if this is meant to be mended, help me find the way." But the answer didn't come right away. One Sunday morning, unable to sleep, Claire wandered into the chapel where she sometimes volunteered. She sat in the last pew, letting the organ's soft music wash over her. Halfway through the service, a shadow fell across the aisle. Daniel slipped into the bench beside her. "I didn't expect to see you here," Claire murmured. He was quiet for a long moment. I read the letter again. She wanted me to live, to love again. I just don't know how to do that without feeling like I'm betraying her. Claire's eyes stung. "Maybe it's not betrayal, Daniel. Maybe it's the answer to her prayer." He didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. And for the first time since she gave him the letter, he met her gaze without looking away. The thaw began with Ethan. One afternoon, Claire arrived to find Ethan dragging a box of Christmas decorations into the living room in February. "What's this?" she asked. He grinned and held up a sign in wobbly handwriting. "Family concert." Daniel walked in, puzzled. "Ethan, what?" The boy pointed at Claire, then to the piano, then to himself. Finally, he patted Daniel's arm and held up the sign again. Claire laughed. "I think he's trying to tell us we're doing a concert together." Daniel sighed, but his lips curved slightly. "He's persistent, I'll give him that." They began rehearsing in the conservatory, Claire teaching Ethan a simple duet, Daniel listening from the armchair. At first, Daniel kept his distance, but one evening he surprised them both by sitting beside Ethan on the bench, adding a deep harmony to their melody. Claire felt something shift. The music wasn't just sound, it was a bridge. When they finished, Ethan clapped, then grabbed both their hands and squeezed. Daniel looked at Claire over his son's head. There was something in his eyes again, not the raw pain of grief, but the beginning of hope. The family concert was small. Just a few friends, some estate staff, and the 3 of them at the piano. Ethan played his part perfectly, his little fingers confident. Claire followed, adding warmth to the melody. Then Daniel's rich chords joined in, filling the room. When the song ended, Ethan whispered to the crowd, "My family." The room went still. Daniel's eyes shimmered, and when he looked at Claire, there was no hesitation. After the guests left, he said softly, "He's right, you know." Claire's breath caught. "Daniel!"
But instead of finishing the thought, he simply took her hand and didn't let go. A week later, snow fell again, blanketing the estate in white. Daniel invited Claire for a walk. They wandered the gardens, Ethan darting ahead to make snow angels. Daniel stopped near the fountain, where the ice glittered like crystal. "Claire, you've brought life back to this place, back to us." She opened her mouth, but he took her hands, his voice steady. "I think Lillian sent you here, and I think she'd want this for all of us." From his coat, he pulled a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, simple but elegant. "Will you marry us?" Claire's laugh mixed with tears. "Yes." On the morning of their wedding, Claire found an envelope on her dressing table, in Lillian's handwriting. Daniel had discovered it in an old desk drawer the night before. It read, "If you're reading this, Daniel, it means that God has brought someone new into your life. Love her. Let her love Ethan. She's my answer to the prayer I whispered the night I left you." Claire pressed the letter to her heart, tears falling. Later, in the chapel, Ethan stood between them as they exchanged vows. And as the music swelled, Claire felt the unmistakable presence of something greater, the love of a woman who had gone before her, the hand of God guiding them all, and the warmth of a family made whole. The Whitmore estate felt different now, not just bigger with Claire's presence, but warmer. The sound of music drifted through the halls more often than silence. Ethan's laughter rang out from the music room. Claire kept teaching at the community center, while Daniel found excuses to visit her classes, often bringing coffee and cookies. Their life was not extravagant, but intentional. Dinners together, prayers before bed, and music before sleep. One evening, Ethan shyly asked if they could write their own song together. They began with a simple melody, but somehow it wove their three lives into one piece, tender, joyful, and full of hope. Daniel called it the Whitmore Song. Spring brought with it a discovery that would change Ethan's world. While organizing boxes in the attic, Daniel found an envelope with Ethan's name on it, in Lillian's handwriting. He debated keeping it until Ethan was older, but Claire reminded him, maybe God's timing is now. That night they sat with Ethan on the couch. Daniel read the letter aloud. "Ethan, if you are reading this, it means I can't be there in person. But I want you to know my greatest wish is that you live surrounded by music, love, and faith. Your daddy will make sure of it. And maybe, one day, you'll have someone else to love you too." When Daniel finished, Ethan's eyes were wet. He hugged both of them tightly. "I do," he whispered. "I have both of you." In May, the community center invited Claire and her students to perform at a citywide charity gala. Daniel offered to sponsor the event, but Claire insisted, "Only if I earn it." The weeks leading up to the gala were filled with rehearsals, Ethan's piano practice, and Claire balancing her role as wife, teacher, and stepmother. One afternoon, as they practiced, Daniel lingered in the doorway. "You belong on a bigger stage," he told her. She smiled. "I already have my biggest stage, here with you and Ethan." Still, she felt a thrill of anticipation. The gala wasn't just a performance, it was a chance to show the city what music could heal.
2 days before the event, disaster struck. A storm tore through the city, flooding the community center's basement where their instruments were stored. Many were damaged beyond repair. Claire felt crushed. Without those instruments, half her students couldn't perform. When Daniel found her sitting in the chapel, head in her hands, he sat beside her. "We'll find a way." She shook her head. "We can't replace everything in time." Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "Claire, God didn't bring us this far to stop here. Let me help." And he did. calling in favors, arranging for replacement instruments to arrive the next morning. The night of the gala, the stage shimmered under warm lights. Claire's students played with a passion that silenced the crowd. When it was time for the final piece, Ethan stepped forward and said, "This song is for my mom and my new mom," he said, his voice steady. Daniel joined them at the piano, and together they played the Whitmore song. The melody was tender but strong, carrying years of grief, healing, and joy all at once. When the last note faded, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Claire looked at Daniel, tears in her eyes. "We did it!" "No," he whispered, "God did it." A week later, they returned to the chapel, where Daniel and Claire had married. The pastor had something for them, a sealed envelope, given to him years ago by Lillian, with instructions to deliver it when the time was right. Inside was a single page. "Daniel, if love finds you again, don't question it." And to the woman reading this beside him, "Thank you for loving my boys. You are my answer to prayer." Claire pressed the letter to her heart. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, Ethan between them. As the chapel's bells rang, they knew without doubt that they were exactly where God meant them to be, a family bound by love, faith, and the music that had brought them together. It was a quiet Sunday morning when Ethan came into the kitchen holding his small composition notebook. "I made something," he said shyly, sliding it toward Claire and Daniel. Inside were neat pencil notes, a melody. Above it, in his wobbly handwriting, "Song for Two Moms." Claire's breath caught. "Ethan, this is beautiful." Daniel's voice was husky. "Why did you write this?" The boy looked at them both. "Because I have two moms now, one in heaven, one here, and I think they both love me." They decided to finish the song together. For days, the estate filled with their rehearsals, Claire at the piano, Daniel adding harmony, Ethan proudly keeping time. One evening as they played, a shaft of sunset light streamed through the window, bathing the room in gold. Claire had the unshakable sense that Lillian was there, smiling. The night they finally completed the song, Daniel suggested they perform it in the chapel. Only a handful of people would be invited, just family, the pastor, and close friends. The day came, and as they played, Claire's voice joined the melody with simple, heartfelt lyrics about love that never dies, about God's way of weaving lives together in unexpected ways. Halfway through, Ethan stopped playing and looked toward the stained glass window. "Hi, Mom," he whispered. No one moved. The sunlight through the glass painted them in colors, a benediction without words. By the last note, there wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. Spring returned with warm winds and blossoms. Life at the Whitmore estate felt whole, not perfect, but perfectly theirs. Claire continued her music program, Daniel supported her, and Ethan thrived in ways neither had imagined. One afternoon, while sorting through boxes in the music room, Claire found something wrapped in tissue. It was the wedding dress, now cleaned, pressed, and carefully stored. Daniel walked in as she lifted it from the box. "I thought you might want to keep it," he said softly. Claire traced the lace. "It doesn't feel like hers anymore, or mine. It feels, well, like it belongs to all of us." They decided together to donate it, not to sell, but to gift it to a small-town bride who couldn't afford one. Inside the bodice, Claire tucked a note. "This dress once carried a love story, and now it carries another. May it bring you joy, courage, and the reminder that God's plans are always greater than ours." The day they gave it away, they returned home and gathered in the music room. Daniel took Claire's hand. "You know, I used to think the dress was just a symbol of loss, but you turned it into a symbol of new beginnings." Claire smiled through her tears. "We all did." Ethan sat at the piano, tapping the opening notes of Song for Two Moms. "Play with me?" he asked. They did, the three of them, filling the air with music that was no longer about grief, but gratitude. As the last note faded, Claire looked at Daniel and Ethan, feeling the presence of the woman who had loved them first, the God who had brought them together, and the life they had built,
a harmony only heaven could have composed. It wasn't just the end of a story, it was the start of a forever.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and leave a kind comment. To help the channel stay motivated to create more great videos, please hit the subscribe button. Wishing you happiness and peace in the light and love of God.